this is a DrumWise Meets, and today I'm here with Vijay Mistry, who's the drummer of Kaiser Chiefs. Hi Vijay.
Hey man, how you doing?
What age did you get into drums, and when you first started playing, what bands or artists specifically inspired you with your playing?
I actually thought, well, at the time you think that you're quite an early starter, but I actually started when I was about 14. And I've only realized from recent years, when you have various meets and greets and whatever else, and people turn up and they go, yeah, here's my son, he's 3 and he's been playing the drum for 5 years, that you realize I didn't actually start that early. But yeah, so I started about 14, and maybe it was about 13, I can't remember. It was around then. No, it was about 14, because it was about the age of 13 I started to really get into what I thought was, you know, I started to identify with music. So like up until that point, it was just whatever was on the radio, whatever was on Top of the Pops. But I always remember my brother, I came home from school one day, and my brother, in his usual grumpy teenage way, had the door shut, music blaring like crazy loud. And it was around that time, it was all like, you know, rave and whatever else. But then one day I just heard something blaring from his room, and I was like, what the hell is that? And opened it up, and he was playing Bleach, the album Bleach by Nirvana. And I was like, that is mental. And then like a week later or so, then he had Nevermind. And then that just blew my mind. And then it was from that point that I was like, well, I need to know what this is. I need to know who else does that. And that's when it all started, to like the whole grunge, American grunge scene. That's where it all started. But then it felt like, you know, centuries apart. But then eventually that merged into, because then with the death of grunge came the birth of, even though they hate the term, Britpop. And so it was then all of that kind of scene. And then in the middle, there was various other things. But with regards to the bands that actually really influenced me, from the grunge scene, it would have been people like Nirvana, obviously. And then Smashing Pumpkins, Mudhoney, and even slightly more left field bands like, you know, Sebado and whatever else, Veruca Soul. And then as it grew, when it went into Britpop, it was ultimately people like Supergrass and people like that, and Elastica, These Animal Men, people like that. And so that's roughly where it all sort of started.
That's cool. That's a good list for people to go and check out some of those bands, definitely. And do you remember what your first drum kit setup was that you had?
I actually do. And the reason I remember it is because I had to fight so hard for it. Yeah. I remember when I first discovered, like I was watching all these bands, we couldn't afford Sky. And so I got my friends to tape videos on MTV, and then I would watch them afterwards. And then I remember watching a whole bunch of sort of like videos live and whatever else, some gigs. And I remember just being so interested in what the drummer did. I wasn't bothered about anyone else. I was just drawn to what the drummer did. And I was just thinking, how's he doing that? What's that? But what was quite cool, and I learned later that not everyone was able to do it. I could hear drum beats. I could hear the kicks. I could hear the snares. I could hear how they related to each other. I could sort of watch what they were doing with their hands, and all right, okay, I guess that's what you play for that bit, and that's what you play for that bit. I never had any lessons. Still to this day, I've never had any lessons. And then I remember watching these videos and being the lonely poor child I was, basically tried to copy it using wooden spoons and dining chairs. Dining chairs, wooden spoons, and pillows on top of the thing. And I was trying to copy what they were doing using that. And then I kept bugging my parents for a drum kit. I kept bugging them. And they were like, no, you're just going to get it. It's going to be massive. You're never going to play it, blah, blah, blah. Cut to about 12, 15 months later, I'm still banging on about it. And so my parents went, right, okay, so you're not going to get a birthday present. You're not going to get a Christmas present. this is everything, and we will buy you a drum kit. But I had such a tight limit. And so I remember looking through the classifieds and seeing, I wasn't interested in anything that was just drums because I couldn't afford anything else. I needed somebody selling everything. And there was a dude somewhere in a village nearby who was emigrating to another country, and he's basically said, right, he's just selling this whole thing. And it was a Premier Olympic, I think it was sort of cream, but it came with everything. But you know, it was all proper stuff that has been shoved in a garage, covered in rust. Nothing really worked. I had to kind of learn how to screw it all together and whatever else. And I remember being crazy embarrassed by it because like my friends could get some stuff that was sort of a bit more contemporary, and I was stuck with this thing that was, I must have been early 70s. But it was a full drum kit.
Yeah.
And ultimately it sat together and it worked. And all I did was put it in my bedroom, and all I did was play music as loud as I could and then drum along to it. And I remember within 5 days of getting it, we received a noise complaint, a letter from the council. And still to this day, I don't think my parents know about
that. Let's just dispose of this letter.
We did, yeah, because I got it, and I basically got it, and I was really scared by it, but then I just threw it away and just said, like, you know, hopefully no one will ever say anything. But yeah, that's what we did.
Nice. Good stuff. So who would you say is your all-time favorite drummer? And I know that's a really hard question.
It is hard because, to tell you the truth, I mean, like, I admire so many drummers, and especially in the Instagram age, you can kind of find a whole bunch of people who you'd never heard of before. And then you just like looking at what they're doing, and it's like, I can admire them definitely, but I just think that there's such strength that comes from the people who you were influenced by when you first started. And because that ultimately forms the foundation of who you were and what you did. And so going back to what I said about it was grunge and then it was followed by Britpop, I think Supergrass were my favorite band from the Britpop era, and Nirvana were my first band that I was properly obsessed by. And so those are the two drummers that sort of influenced me, because I remember watching Dave Grohl doing his thing and just thinking, Jesus, he hits that hard. And it wasn't, and I think it's really weird as well. And the same with Danny Goffey. I mean, like, Danny Goffey, he was just so fast around the kit. And what I liked about him is that it's almost like he didn't care. You know what I mean? And it was all over the place. And there was so much about Keith Moon, about the way he played and whatever else. But I hadn't really heard of Keith Moon when I was 14 years old because my parents didn't listen to that sort of stuff. So I was just sort of like blown away by what Danny Goffey did, and I was blown away by what Dave Grohl did. But they were very different in style. But I think the one common factor between them is that it was relatively simple beats. But it's just the way they played it and the style and the passion. And what I've realized is that going through my life as a musician, but also going through my life as a fan of music, that's always stayed with me. I've never been a massive fan of kind of like, you know, crazy fast fretboard work and like loads of fills around the toms. And I've never been like massively fascinated by really intricate time signatures and whatever else. What I really like is people who are able to be in a band and create their own space and using their energy to kind of help songs lift and fall at the right place and doing the right thing at the right time. And a lot of it's the simplicity behind it. I mean, like the ultimate examples of that would be someone like Tony McCarroll for Oasis. He was like the most simple beats. It was the same beats for every song, but it worked so well for those songs. And it gave it that thing. And although you had, I think it was Alan White afterwards, and obviously a better drummer, more intricate beats and whatever else, but I always preferred the beats for the Oasis songs. And obviously we got the Meg White example as well for the White Stripes. Again, you know, it was simple stuff. It wasn't metronome timing. It wasn't crazy fills. It wasn't whatever else, but it just suited that thing so well. And I've always been really drawn to that rather than the the crazy stuff.
And I think what you're saying there is really important and quite often overlooked these days, because I think, you know, we mentioned Instagram. A lot of the time, it seems to all just be about chops and how fast you can play and how many sticks you can juggle at the same time. And people are forgetting about, like, I'm not saying that's bad, that's part of it, but people are forgetting about what's the most important thing, which is playing for the song, you know, playing a groove that actually works with the music that you're playing rather than how fast you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess it totally depends on who you are and what you're doing it for. I mean, so like you say, for example, the Instagram world, and there's loads of great drummers on there doing their thing and whatever else, but their brand, I guess, and their thing is themselves. And so they have to almost show off what they can do and whatever else. Whereas if your driving factor, which it was absolutely with me because it was pre-social media or pre-whatever, was to just be in a band. And I've always said I am not a great drummer, but I also say that I'm a fantastic drummer in a band because I know how to sit in a song. I know how to almost behave in a rehearsal room or whatever else. You know that it's not about what you're doing. You know it's about, well, what is the best for the song rather than what will make me stand out as a person. It's never been about that. It's always been about how you sit and bed into a song. And so I guess it may have been a totally different story if I wasn't interested in being in bands, but I like drumming, because I would have probably carried on rehearsing on my own in my bedroom, trying to get better and better and faster and more obscure and more obscure. But I never did that because ultimately what happened is as soon as I could, I joined a band. And then all my time was spent trying to be in a band rather than trying to be a drummer. And it was at that point where I stopped sort of playing along to songs and whatever else and started thinking about writing original songs and being that side of things. And so it depends who you are and what you do, I guess. If you're selling yourself, or I guess if you're selling the band. And also, I guess in music in the past, let's say, decade, it seems to be going on forever, but it's not been band orientated. It's been very much sort of like solo artists, bedroom artists, and whatever else. And so drummers in a band are definitely not as prevalent as they were 20 years ago. So, but what you do have is a lot of session musicians, because all these solo artists and whatever else, bedroom artists, whatever else, if they do eventually tour, they need a band behind them. And so then you've got loads of solo artists. And so what you notice there is that when you're watching all of these performances, you can't deny the skill and you can't deny the precision and whatever else. But, and I know this isn't going to be popular, personally, I just, the amount of heart in it isn't there. I don't feel the connection. I feel the precision. I feel the kind of, wow, that works at that point, bang, 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 bang. But I don't feel the heart. And I'm not saying that all bands have got heart, but I'm just, there's a very subtle nuances that you can sort of feel when you're seeing that sort of performance. But yeah, you know, that maybe that's just personal preference as well, because it's what I'm used to listening to. And
I think everyone's entitled to an opinion on it because music's an art form, isn't it? So there is no right and wrong. So, you know, it's it's totally it's a totally valid thing to say. And going back to what you said earlier about the kind of our first influences are like, you know, our foundations in drumming. I feel like I should just bring that up because I totally agree with you there. And you know, because we're waffling on here, and my original question was, who was your favourite drummer? And just to link it back to that, we're waffling on in a good way, but to link it back to that, my first favourite drummers were all drummers in bands. So so Trey Cool from Green Day, like I first heard him, and I was just like, my mind has exploded, like But on the complete other extreme, which I think links to what we were just saying really nicely, Stuart Cable from the Stereophonics. I mean, you know, really, like, you know, there's not a lot technical going on with his drumming, but boy, his drumming was good. And,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, totally playing for the song.
Yeah, playing for the song. I think that's thingy. And then, like I say, going back to the sort of the session environment thing, I don't think it, like I said, it's nothing to do with the playing, but there's something to be said when you're playing with the same musicians over and over again. Let's say you're playing 100 gigs a year for 10 years, and then rehearsals on top of that and other performances. You basically become a part of each other, and you sort of end up second guessing. And so, for example, I know, like I said, I'm not going to be technically the best drummer, but Simon, who plays bass, will probably know, oh, he's about to do this fill, and when he does that, he speeds up by 1.5 BPM.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do that because we've done it 100, 200, 300 times before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so there's something to be said about just knowing how each other play in a band.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm working as a team, as a band. Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
So just talking about that, because you talked about rehearsals and stuff, something that I think that people might be interested in when you're in a band. So for Kaiser Chiefs, how does it work in terms of, like, let's say you've got a festival run, you know, over summer, not this summer,
Not
but
this
like you
summer.
got, and you've got some new songs or whatever. How does it go about? How do you go about preparing for those shows in terms of like rehearsal time and stuff? How does that work?
I think we obviously have the songs that people want to hear. Festivals are very different to our own shows, because festivals, you're in and you're out, and you've got to hit them hard, because they're ultimately, not everybody there is going to be a Kaiser Chiefs fan. Some people are going to be just curious. Some people probably want to go there so they've got something to whinge about. But then, like, ultimately, you've got to try and blow everyone away, and then you've also got to blow away everybody on the stage, is like, you know, everyone else on the bill as well, because, you know, you have to be. You're ultimately, it's sort of like it's like a slightly unwritten competition, because you've got to basically be the band or the artist or the act that everyone in that crowd goes away talking about. And so, like, when it comes to preparing for a festival, you base it around the sort of hits, and you try and keep it ramping, and you try and keep the energy up and the octane up and whatever else. You might throw some new songs in there if you've got an album out and whatever else. But then when you're preparing for like your own shows, for example, that's a totally different art form, because you've got, you know, everybody in the audience there has basically come because they want to see you and no one else. Do you know what I mean? And so in that respect, then you're able to kind of include some of the deep cuts, and you maybe want to slow it down a bit, because you know there are certain songs that are very fan centric and whatever else. And so then that takes a lot more preparation, because that sort of set, you kind of have to sort of ride the wave as you go through, and you end up going through the set a lot more. And it doesn't always work. You'll get whatever you think is plan A for gig one, and then afterwards you'll be like, whoa, that bit tanked, man. Do you know what I mean? And so then you'd have to kind of swap things around, and probably by about gig 2 or 3, then it's definitely, this is what it's going to be. But then the prep only really has to happen about once a year, because we're never off. And so, like, there's never a massive gap between shows. And so ultimately, once you've got that bedded in at the beginning, and you've got the first couple of shows under your belt, then other than minor tweaks, nothing really happens for the rest of the year. But then the following year, then it all starts over again. Then you sort of tweak it a little bit more, different songs in the set, different feel, different outfits.
Different drum kit, which
Yeah,
actually I haven't asked you about yet. Can you talk us through your equipment setup for live shows?
Yeah, so I endorsed DW for the drums. Basically, because when I first joined the band, we just needed ultimately something that we knew was definitely good, and something that was roadworthy, because the number of shows and the amount of traveling that this stuff does is crazy. And so I had a quick look at some of my favorite drummers, and what they played and whatever else. And then basically DW seemed to be a reasonably similar theme that kept coming up. And I'd like the look of DW drums. And so I went and played a few, and I was like, yeah, these are amazing. You know what I mean? They were a real step up from what I'd been playing before. And so we needed an A and a B rig kit. So I got a collector's series for the A rig, and I got a jazz series for the B rig, but that was jazz series, but in rock size shells.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I got that is because that's what Dave Grohl used for them Crooked Vultures. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm quite intrigued to see how that works. And both of them sound great. They've got definitely different feel to them, but but yeah, they were both great. But then since then, I've got another collector series just for, it'd been 10 years since about 8 years since I bought another live kit. So I thought, you know what, I'll treat myself. Cymbals wise, I endorse Sabian. And I've always loved Sabian cymbals, and I love dealing with them, and I think they're just great people, and I think they're quite innovative with what they do. My favorite thing that I've got of theirs, some 15-inch artisan hi-hats, which I think are just, they're spectacular. They're such a nice, crisp, closed sound, and not too overpowering when you open them up. They've got a nice control to them, but they feel lively enough to be able to fill an arena. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
And then sticks, I use the Vic Firth. I can't remember what the number they are, but they were really nice. I've managed to get my name on some sticks, which is something that I always wanted. So something to kind of show off. And then what else do I use? I've got an SPD SX sampler, like basically everyone on Earth seems to have. That I use not just occasionally when we've got the odd sample to do, just the odd thing. That it's nice to be able to kind of mimic the album identically every now and again. If there's a little sample at the start of a song, or the occasional crazy hit in the middle, it's nice to kind of incorporate that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything really.
Are you do you use Click live, you guys? Is that something that you do a lot?
No, we have done on occasion, but ultimately we try and keep it as live as possible. There may be the occasional thing where we aren't able, like if you're doing like a more deep cut album track or something, where it's definitely, you know, the song's been created just to be on the album and not to be play live, but you just think, do you know what, let's give it a go live. But then there's like 17 synth parts or whatever else, or some other crazy samples going on, then that's a good time to use a Click. But other than that, no, we try and keep it as raw as possible, because it ultimately, it's really, as cheesy as it sounds, it's like it's totally audience dependent as well. And so like you see how a crowd reacts, then you react. And sometimes if you were always stuck to a Click, then you wouldn't be able to react to it. Do you know what I mean? At that moment in time, they're going nuts. If you speed it up slightly, you know that they're going to go even more nuts. Not going crazy fast, but you know, you've got this slight differences that you can do, and it just sort of feels like it would help a show. And I think that's a good thing to have the ability to do.
Now, this next question, I've been asking people just kind of in general, especially guys that do a lot of session stuff, but I'm going to ask you specifically for like when you joined Kaiser Chiefs. So when you first got the gig, how did you learn the songs? Because I think a lot of people don't realize how it works. Obviously with a big band like Kaiser Chiefs, of course you'd have known the songs already, you know, you'd have heard a lot of the songs, but there'd have still been stuff to learn. But, you know, did you just listen to stuff? Did you listen to stuff and transcribe it? Or, you know, did they go, right, here you go, here is the entire show written out in drum music for you. Here you are. Just, you know, just learn that.
Well, the transcription and the here's the show in drum music, would not fly because I can't read drum music.
Well, there's the answer to that one, then.
So
I thought
that
I'd
would
say that when you said about
that
not having lessons, but I thought I'd go with it.
no, that would absolutely confuse the hell out of me. I'm just it's funny, like I like it all goes back to what you want to learn drums for, doesn't it? Because like ultimately, I just always had a passion for music, and I always just wanted to be in a band and write songs. And at no stage have I ever thought to myself, do you know what? Being able to read drum music would have really helped there. That's never happened to me in my whole life.
But it does depend on where our career takes us, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
I'm
definitely.
really glad that you're talking about this, because it's a really important thing to talk about, because I totally agree with you that you don't need to be able to read drum music to be a good drummer. But then for the way my career has taken me, if I couldn't read drum music, I wouldn't be a very good drum teacher, you know? So it kind
definitely. Well, this is what I mean. So like I would, because that's my path has always been bands. Do you know what I mean? There's been no aspiration to do anything else other than that. In fact, I've never even thought about the fact of whether I'd still be drumming had I not been in bands. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what that would have happened. And you have to bear in mind that like I joined Kaiser Chiefs after, let me think, it would have been about 94. So 18 years. Is that right? Yeah. So I'd been playing drums for 18 years up until the point where I joined Kaiser Chiefs. And yeah, again, at no point in there was I ever not in a band. And it wasn't the same band. It was just I couldn't really see myself doing anything DrumWise that didn't actually include being in a band.
And just to go off on one very slightly there, because I think this is appropriate. I've done my homework, and it's right, isn't it, that you got into Kaiser Chiefs through being in a previous band?
Yeah. So basically, I came to Leeds. I went to university there, and do you want the long version or the short version?
Let's go with the short one, just because it's going to be a do anyway.
So the short version was basically a friend of a friend knew Simon, and I met him. And then at one day, he basically was in a beer garden, and he was in a band called Visa, and they needed a drummer, and they saw me. And then they came over, introduced themselves, and asked me if I wanted to go to a rehearsal, and said yeah. And so then I went to a rehearsal the next day, and then that was it. I was playing in a band called Visa, and I did that for about 6 to 8 months with Simon. But then Simon left and joined Runston Parva, who became Kaiser Chiefs. And then in the meantime, I had my own journey for about 12 years of multiple different bands, doing loads of different stuff, loads of great stuff. And then one day I got a call from Simon, just saying like, Nick's leaving the band. Would you like to come and have a play with us? And I was like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah. And then, so just taking it back, then I guess when you had to learn that material, which you kind of already knew some of it anyway, it was just all about listening loads.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, it's one of those things where I don't know whether it's a skill that I've had naturally or a skill that I've acquired just because of what I've done with music and drums and bands in the past. But I've always been able to do various things. I've always been able to pretty much deconstruct songs. So I can hear notes, I can hear drum beats, I can sort of sense rhythms, whatever. I've always been able to do that. And that combined with the fact I've always been able to remember song structures. Even if we'd written a song in a rehearsal the week before, then the next week we'd try it again. Everyone, and Kaiser Chiefs is no different. I generally look at me to ask, well, what happens next? And I know what happens next because I'm able to just process it like that. Yeah. And I don't know whether that, like I said, that's a skill from always, because I've always been the one who joined a band. I joined Visa, and then they were a few iterations. Then that all disappeared, and then I was looking for another band, and then I joined another band, and then we had a few iterations of that, and then I joined Kaiser Chiefs. So whatever I've done, I've always learned other people's songs before writing my own songs. And when I was first starting, I listened to music on CDs and learned how to play drum beats and whatever else. So I don't know whether I naturally am able to do all those things that I just said, or because of the path that my life has taken, that's how I've learned how to do it. I can't answer that.
And it is a good way of learning. I'm always telling people, try and learn stuff by ear. But when you're with a band that's as big as Kaiser Chiefs, do you have the luxury of them going, right, here you go, here's all the songs we want you to learn, but just the drum mixes? Is that something that's happened?
I probably would have been allowed to have that, but I didn't do that because, again, that would probably just confuse me because I've always just learned by listening to songs.
Yeah.
And so all I did was, when it came to, right, we're going on tour then. Well done. You've done well in the rehearsal. We're going on tour. I'm like, okay, cool. And then, yeah, they sort of said, roughly, there are these 30 songs that we either play or we might not play or we mix it up or whatever else. And I just made a playlist of all those 30 songs and just drummed along to them.
And actually, very relevant question to that, because I'm asking people to learn stuff within a week all the time. And people go, what? You want me to learn this chorus groove in 1 week? How long did you get to learn those 30 songs?
We were probably going on tour. In about a couple of weeks. It was probably about a week before we were doing rehearsals.
There we go then, guys. See, so all the DrumWise students that are like, oh man, you want me to learn like this chorus groove by next lesson.
Vijay, but this is the thing though, because like, again, it wasn't through kind of like, because obviously I had to do it and whatever else, but I don't know, the passion for music and drumming in my life runs so deep. It wasn't a chore, it was exciting. It was like, I remember this and I want to do this. And of those 30 songs, there may have been 3 songs that I was sort of struggling to really understand how it would work live. But then when we got in a rehearsal studio, then that's what we did. But then like, yeah. So, for my first rehearsal, for example, Nick's left the band, do you want to come down and try? That was only a couple of days. Right. And then I just had to learn a whole bunch of songs. And like you said, you've got your second kid on the way or whatever else. My daughter was born a week and a half before that.
Oh man, that's
and there was so much going on at that time. Basically, I was a dad for the first time about a week and a half before. My work wanted me to become a manager of this group, so they were kind of pressuring me to make a decision on that. And the band I was in at the time, we'd just released our debut record, and so we were just about to head out on tour as well. And so there was like all of these things happening. And then it was like, could you learn these songs because we've got rehearsal? And I was like, yeah, all right, fine, yeah.
Changing nappies while listening to the Kaiser.
Honestly, it was nuts. But like throughout my whole career, I can call it a career now because I've been relatively successful. But throughout my whole career, yeah, it's just like my wife's just been so like supportive and strong and there for every second. You know what I mean? Even for the whatever decade or so where we didn't go on holiday because I used all my annual leave to go on tour. You know what I mean? It's just so like, yeah, all of that. She definitely helped with all of that.
I've got a couple of curveball questions for you here. So what are your hobbies away from drums?
Again, I mean, it was a really weird one because I've been trying to figure that out recently. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but ultimately, up until joining Kaiser's, my hobby was music. My hobby was being in bands. That's what it was. But when it becomes your actual thing that you do, you're like, all right, I've spent my whole life, because it was my whole life. It was like working during the daytime, gigging or rehearsing or recording at night. And I did that for years and years and years. And so there was no time for really another hobby that I could really focus on. But then you realize after a while, what I have realized is that I do have a big hobby in in clothes. But again, that's totally linked with what I've done because I've always been in bands and I've always been part of a scene. And clothing is always so important to that, whether you realize it or not. You can always tell a band by what they're going to sound like or what they're going to do or whatever because of the way they look. And so fashion is always, I mean, it's historic, isn't it? Fashion and music go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so, recently I've sort of like thought to myself, well, you know, I've got quite a lot of clothes because of all of the album campaigns we've done. Any downtime, it's always been of interest to me. I've always been a huge fan of vintage clothing and whatever else. And so I've started an Instagram page called Vijay Wears, and it's just sort of various outfits and stuff. And ultimately what it's doing, it's sort of promoting vintage clothing. It's promoting slow fashion. It's supporting sort of independent stores, independent brands. So it's just sort of like, just sort of like, I find it quite an interesting thing to do and quite a therapeutic thing to do, to kind of research into all these brands and shops and whatever else who are all operating independently, especially current with what's happening at the moment. And it's important to kind of try and support the small businesses and whatever else. And so I thought I'd marry all those things together. And the good thing about it is, because the other thing when you talk about being a hobby, if my hobby was, I don't know, fishing, but I'm on tour all the time. And so you can't take all your fishing stuff with you. Whereas this is something that I can do anywhere in the world. And it sort of gives me something to do in the downtime. And so, that's probably my main hobby at the moment, I guess.
Cool. And it's a great answer. I've said to a lot of people answering that question that we're really lucky, and you basically said it, we're really lucky because no matter how we think of it, drums started out as a hobby for all of us. Like, you know, when we first started playing when we were 14, 15, and in one way or another, it becomes our career. So we're lucky that our hobby kind of pays the bills.
Yeah, definitely. But so it's really funny because like, then when you have any kind of like downtime, I'm not thinking to myself like, phew, thank God I don't have to play drums again. When I have any downtime, I'm thinking, I want to play drums again. I want to write songs. I want to do that. And so like, I find it really difficult to say, right, I'm going to go to now making model aeroplanes. I can't do that because I'm just thinking, well, that to me almost feels like a waste of time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because the thing I do is drums and music. So then the clothes thing sort of like fits in quite well with that, because ultimately when you're in a band, especially the size of Kaiser Chiefs as well, you are always thinking about what you're going to look like and what we're going to look like as a band and whatever else. So I guess the two things marry together quite well. So then it ends up in my head making sense.
It makes sense. And now we're on to the most important question of this entire interview. Okay, this is the one, Vijay. So are you ready for this? Right. What's your favourite biscuit?
This is a very contentious subject in our household, because it's dependent. It's the same as like, I mean, do you go fancy or do you go staple? That's the sort of question. I think I'm a big fan of a custard cream, and I'm also quite a big fan of a jammy dodger for, you know, special occasions. You know, if the Queen's coming round, then I'll definitely get the jammy dodgers out.
Nice. And the second part to that question then is, so whether it be a custard cream or a jammy dodger, would you dunk?
Oh, no. I'm so against dunking. And the thing is, my wife has taught my kids about dunking. And so if they have a biscuit, they start walking over to you with their crumbly biscuit in hand. And I'm like, no. So it even got to the point where I'd make my wife and I a cup of tea, but then I'd make a half a cup of tea for the kids, just so they're allowed to dunk their biscuit in it.
They're not allowed to. Good idea.
They're not allowed to drink it, but they have a cup of tea. Add a bit more cold water so it gets a little bit colder. But they're allowed to dunk in third-party cup of tea. They're not going anywhere near mine.
I love that as an idea. That's great, because I like dunking, but I don't like if the biscuit
sediment. Yeah.
I don't like sediment. Yeah.
Because what's really grim about sediment, I've got a real thing about sediment at the bottom of cups of tea, because then it's just like, what have you been drinking? It's this horrible thing. But my wife's got this real thing about leftover condiments. So basically, do you know, if you over squeeze your ketchup and then you leave it at the side and it grows this dark film over the top of your ketchup, she absolutely gags at that. She can't touch it, so she makes me clear that way. But I gag at biscuit sediment at the bottom of tea. I think it's grim.
This is probably a good chance for me to ask you, for Kaiser Chief fans, what's your rider?
We have, again, it is an ongoing discussion about what is our rider. Because, I don't know, we've never been massively comfortable with waste. So you can order the world on your rider. And then if it's just left over, you just feel really bad about it. Even though you are sort of told that maybe some people use it and whatever else, but then you just don't want to waste stuff. But ultimately, if there's crisps and Haribo and water, then everything else can just play catch up. But ultimately, if there was no Haribo or no crisps, I think there would be some upset people. We usually get bread as well, because you never know. It's not always glamorous. I mean, you do occasionally get the place where you sort of like get treated to the nicest restaurants in town and whatever else. But there are plenty of days where you're eating a what's it sandwich on a cold bus. Do you know what I mean? It does happen. It absolutely does happen. So you need bread, you need crisps, and you need Haribo.
Is that like a multi-pack of Haribo with the little packets, or are we talking several, Do
you know what? We sort of like being surprised about that. But I think when it comes to crisps, the general rule is the posher, then the worse it is. So if you've got anything that says sea salt or cracked black pepper, or 7-year-old aged mature blah blah blah, then they're going to be like, you know what, we'll leave those for now. If it's got loads of numbers in the ingredients and when you get it out it stains your hand bright red, then they're the ones that you want, because they also make the tastiest sandwiches. You've got your Frazzles, you've got your Whatsits, you've got your Monster Munch chipsticks. You want to go down those lines, Knickknacks, Tangy Toms, that kind of idea. And I know that we definitely have skips on the rider as well, because one person in our band absolutely loves skips.
Have you ever got the what are they called? Are they called Roysters? I used to love them.
Roysters, yeah, the T-bone steak. Yeah, they were in my. Do you know what? 1 minute, I've got my computer here somewhere. There we go. I've not updated this for a long time. Oh yeah, here we go. Top 10 crisps. No, I've only got 6 on there at the moment. This may have changed, but at the time, T-bone steak Roysters is on the list. Beef and mustard Brannigans, beef hula hoops, ribbon saucy knickknacks, prawn cocktail skips, and Whatsits, the cheesy ones. That has changed.
We have very similar crisp tastes. The only one I'd take off is Whatsits.
Do you know what? Yeah, my wife hates a Whatsit as well. But I've discovered I think it might be Sensations, but they've done a recent selection of really spicy crisps, and the jalapeno and cheese are astounding.
Yeah.
They are obsessively great. They don't really taste of cheese, it's more jalapeno, but oh my God, they are incredible. And they actually do have a kick as well. So they are
I have
good.
to try some of those.
Yeah.
Now, from crisps to my last serious question here. So I think I'm going to make this question more about drummers that want to make a success in bands, just because of what we've talked about. And obviously that's what you've done. So if you could give one bit of advice to up and coming drummers that want to succeed in a band, let's say they're in a band right now and they want that band to make it, shall I say, what advice could you give them?
I would say that you've got to genuinely be honest with yourself. I think you've got to know why you're doing it. and I'm saying this hand on heart, I never joined a band with the single aim of being crazy successful. I would be absolutely lying if I said I didn't want that to happen or that wasn't a dream. But if your sole reason is to just be successful, then I think you're doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. For me personally, the whole journey has been great. And it's not always, and it's most of it, I would say, even at this moment in time, I would say 70% of it was unsuccessful in some people's eyes, but to me was crazy successful. You know, the first time you write a song by yourselves, the first time you go in a recording studio, the first time somebody says to you, I like your band. You know what I mean? The first time you get played on the radio, all of those things were just part of the story. And I think if you have a genuine passion for it, then being what you consider successful or not doesn't matter. It's about the journey. It's about the friendships you make. It's about the experiences. So my advice is ultimately enjoy the journey, because you will always, like I do, you look back and go, do you know what? That was great. And I've made my best friends and my best experiences through being in a band and playing and whatever else. And I never look back and go, you know, God, I wish we'd have made it then, and I wish we'd have made it then. You say like, oh, this song should have been more successful than it was, and blah, blah, blah. But it was never about, well, gotta make it, gotta make it, gotta make it. It was just about enjoying what you were doing with who you were doing with. Because for me, it was like hanging out with my mates, you know, like 3-4 times a week, and making music and, you know, experiencing stuff together. And, you know, it was that's what it's about. So my advice is ultimately just enjoy it.
And would you say, I've had different answers on this sort of thing. Would you say that it's sensible if you want to be in a band and, you know, you want to make a living out of it, but you're obviously doing it as a hobby, let's say, going back to that, is it sensible to have a backup plan as well?
Oh, I'm absolutely going to say 100% yes, because it's what I'm going to tell my children. Because, like I said, the enjoying the journey is not just about music; it's about life in general. You can use that as a whole thing. And I really enjoyed my time at university, and the friends I made there, the experiences. I met my wife there, and enjoying. In fact, at university, that's how I ended up meeting Simon as well, and that's how I ended up doing what I was doing and whatever else. But like, basically, I enjoyed being, because I used to be a scientist. That's what I did as a job. Wow. And then basically I enjoyed doing that, and I still enjoy it. I still love watching science programs. I do miss some aspects of doing that and whatever else. But like, you know, you can't just say, right, what I'm going to do is be a drummer or be a session drummer or whatever. It's a very competitive world and whatever else. But that's not to say that, like, aiming for those things, that you should have to do something completely different as well, like I did, like as being a scientist. What I always say is, like, if you say, for example, you really want to be in a band, that's what you want to do. It's like, cool, all right, but learn from everyone you meet along the way. Because the first gig you play, you didn't just turn up and start playing drums and people were there. There was a promoter, there was a venue, there was someone doing the sound, someone was managing that band that you're supporting, there's somebody doing the lights, somebody's driving the truck or owning the company that drives the trucks that go to these things, somebody developed and designed that light show. So you've got a whole team of people there. There's somebody who put the lights up, you've got the rigging people, you've got the people who made the room, who made this room sound acoustically good. Do you know what I mean? Who sold you that drum kit? Who manufactured that drum kit? So if you're really interested in music, keep your eyes open. When you get played on the radio, it wasn't just a DJ. You've got the producers on the show. You've got the radio pluggers. You've got a whole team of people involved there. Who signed that band? You've got the record company. You've got the people who publish it. So you've got the publishing company. So you're not just being a drummer in a band. If you keep your eyes open, there are a million jobs associated, and you never know. One of those jobs you might actually like better than being a drummer. But there's no reason to say you can't do both at the same time. Really
good advice. Vijay, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. Thanks a lot, man.